Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World with me, John Jordan. So it's our regular monthly roundup of what's happening in terms of the top games for on-chain activity. Obviously other data exists, and this is just sort of part of looking at the blockchain game sort of data spectrum, but I think it's sort of good to do it once a month just to see sort of what's going on, and we can pull out some trends. So this is the first graph we normally start off with, looking at the sort of the games we all know and love, I suppose. And I've started. This is almost what we're getting on for now. This is nine months into the 10th month now in October. So we can see here, obviously, not sort of much has changed really in the last couple of months. We see here starting off, Pixels very strong, but we know it had sort of always had lots of bots, and it was always changing its reward system. So we see a big drop off here. It's actually getting down to a pretty low level, like 20,000 daily active unique wallets. Obviously, it's sort of moving to this more sort of staking idea, and it's going to launch some new apps. It's got a pet app coming out, so we'll see. But the main sort of basic sort of social farming app is sort of the big loser of the year, I suppose, from a daily activity point of view. Also down there is Nine Chronicles, so this is in green. This is this sort of fully on-chain RPG. From Planetarium, South Korean developer, and it started off the year 90,000 on PC and mobile, and it's sort of come down again to sort of 20,000. There should be some new games launching using its token, so we'll see if that sort of does any pick up. But yeah, there's the decline there. And a lot of these games as well. One aspect of this is obviously the token price of the price of the tokens that underlie these games has gone down a lot as well. So that these games have been out for a while, so people tend to churn over time, and if the token price is going down as well, they sort of people can't be bothered they don't see it as an investment from that point of view. Not that every blockchain game should be an investment. At the top here we see the red and the blue of Axie Infinity and Alien Worlds. So we can see here, really for the majority of the year, these two have been sort of roughly around the same level. We can see Axie Infinity is actually very sort of constant in terms of being over 100,000 daily active unique wallets. It's actually gone up a little bit into September. This is mainly due to incentivization. So if you go in and play the game, you can earn some AXS token. So this is, if that wasn't in there, obviously it wouldn't be at this level, so you can argue whether that's sort of a core function of a blockchain game or not. But that's what's happening, and not quite the same level. What Alien Worlds started off the year under 100,000, so actually had gone up quite a bit. Is now over 100,000. Pretty steady. I mean, this is a game that's been out for as long really as Axie Infinity, not so high profile, sort of more of a DAO system, but again it's sort of another sort of nominally like a mining game, but there's a lot of interesting DAO stuff going on in there. It's probably not, it's a more of a narrative sort of game, a sort of community game rather than a obvious game with strong game elements. But it's all these will have bots in them, but we can look at the trends, and they've been pretty steady all year. I guess the most interesting game we've seen this year, obviously launched this year, which is this orange line. So this is MapleStory N. Actually, we're tracking here its underlying blockchain, which runs off Avalanche, called Hennessy. But that's the only game running on it. So this is the Hennessy blockchain, which is people playing MapleStory and trading on the marketplace. So we can see it actually grew really fast. As ever, they had loads of bots. They took did a first sort of ban hammer, got rid of a lot of bots. You can see went right down again, sort of went up again, more banning, and then it's sort of steadily sort of grown, sort of plateauing now. Again, they're still actually getting rid, I think, of bots. So you sort of go through various phases with bots. I think you get the most egregious ones out first, and then you sort of sort of work out sort of what accounts you want to ban for doing things that are technically against the ULAs and all that sort of stuff. But it's still doing pretty well. So it's not seeing this massive growth. Still doing about 70,000 daily active unique wallets. A little sort of pick up generally every week when they have their sort of on a Sunday, they have their sort of in-game reward stuff going on there. So we see that sort of regular sort of thing. But it's not up to 100,000. So steady growth, and we'll see as that game sort of builds out more features. Okay, so that's the sort of top line for the bigger games. So this is just going down into MapleStory again, so we can see here just a bit clearer. Here's the sort of broad trend. But it did sort of peak up here in sort of August. So we had these sort of peaks up here. We're down a little bit from that, but I think, as I say, there's been some banning of accounts for botting and stuff like that. Sort of not botting, running macros and stuff in game. So that's happened there. And again, here the token price has gone down a lot. So sort of from that point of view, the growth is sort of maybe more impressive than it first seems. Okay, I thought I'd also look at so the other sort of big game that's been knocking around, and I didn't put it in the first graph because we're sort of still waiting for it to go onto the mainnet, is Off the Grid. So Off the Grid, extraction shooter game, launched on console actually about a year ago, now on PC, also on Steam. Not quite clear sort of how all those well, at the moment they all interact with the testnet. So we can see here, this is from DappRadar. We can see here this red dots are the testnet data. So this is actually a logarithmic scale. So this has been running pretty steadily about 250,000, 200,000 daily active unique wallets. It's all gone up and down depending. But because it's testnet data, I've always been a bit not nervous. I've always been a bit skeptical of it. Because testnet data is, you can fake any blockchain data, but testnet data in particular you can. So we see here, this is some level of sort of activity. And we can start to see here in blue, they've started to migrate some accounts over to the mainnet. So Gunz is the Gunz, I think they call it their blockchain. So we can see here it sort of starts off pretty much at 0, goes up to 1,000. Again, this is an Avalanche-based blockchain, and then there's some quite big spikes here. So at the end of September, start of October, they've started migrating. So they migrated some accounts over. The number was 21,000, I think, to begin with. So this is presumably this data here, running at about a few thousand daily active unique wallets from 21,000. Not a terrible amount, but now they're sort of moving more wallets over. So we're seeing these big spikes. They're actually had some days. Well, we'll look at some other data, but some higher level data, some high level days over 10,000. So obviously one of the things we're not worried about, I should keep saying worried. One of the things that we're interested in with migration is what you would do is you would migrate all the accounts over, so you'd sort of get a big spike of activity, but then it will drop down again because maybe some of those accounts you're migrating over are not playing the game anymore. So you have a big migration. You can imagine if you had 1 million accounts, you'd migrate all those accounts over. So one day you'd have a big million sort of number, and then but if only 1,000 people are playing, it'll go back down to 1,000. So we're in that sort of in between time at the moment. So just sort of be aware of that. The other thing I did do is also because data is data, you also have to be a little bit careful of it. So this is looking. So what we looked at before was DappRadar. So this is the red line here, again on a log scale. So this is DappRadar's data for the Gunz mainnet. We also have the blue line. We also have the Gunz mainnet from the Avalanche ecosystem block explorer. So and you can see this. They sort of line up to some degree, quite during this period of time. They're quite tightly aligned, but they're never exact. And there's also, here there's some big gaps here. Avalanche is citing many more users, and certainly here we can see here. While DappRadar is saying, well, maybe 20,000 at this spike, Avalanche is seeing over 100,000. Again, these are the transition spikes, so they're moving testnet accounts onto mainnet. So we know we're going to see these sort of transitory spikes, but Avalanche Block Explorer is showing much higher levels than DappRadar. So I'm not particularly, saying either which one is right. I would say that Avalanche is probably doing it at a more sort of ecosystem level, and DappRadar there may be some smart contracts that DappRadar isn't looking at for that reason. So I'm not saying one's more right than the other, but just always be aware. Certainly, most of this data comes from DappRadar, I should say, that they may not always have all the smart contracts, and you have to sort of, even with on-chain data, be a little bit careful about what actually are people doing. Are people actually playing a game? Does the game require them to play? Is it fully on-chain, or are they just sort of logging in to claim some tokens? So, so you have to have a little awareness around these sort of data points. Final graph we'll look at. So this is looking at some games on Immutable. So we occasionally look at these. So these are games I think. I've played these games. I think they're pretty reasonable games, but it's interesting. These are at a much lower level. So we can see here, this is daily active unique wallets, as it always is. So very small numbers. A few thousand, not even up to 10,000. Looking back to May, and we have Guild of Guardians, which is one of Immutable's own games. So historically, it peaked at about 15,000 when it launched. It's had another little rise up to about 7,500, and then came straight back down again. And it's gone up again a little bit, but it's running at a couple of thousand to 3,000, something like that. Raven's Quest, a sort of PC-based RPG, again, sort of really nice game if you like that sort of stuff, but it sort of launched and then sort of declined, has a bit of a spike up when they launched some DLC, but it's sort of come back down again to sort of where it was. So it's looking like sort of 2,500 daily active unique wallets at the moment. And then Immortal Rising, a mobile idle game that at one point did extremely well, but it sort of came down to almost zero here, a few hundred, and then it sort of come back up again to I think about 4,500. So some of these pickups, we know exactly why Raven's Quest had this jump. It released some DLC. For these two, Immortal Rising and Guild of Guardians, I think this is due to Immutable running its sort of play. So Immutable has its play sort of reward system, and it's plugging games into there, and it can sort of drive a certain level of traffic. But you can see here, it's sort of it's not driving tens of thousands of people; it's driving a few thousand people. So Immortal Rising goes from less than 1,000 to maybe sort of 4,000. So it's having a big percentage increase, a big relative increase, but not a big absolute increase. So it's not driving these games high, up to the levels where they were. So you can always sort of, not manipulation, you can always drive a few more people into your game. But obviously it's very hard to sustain that, and we've seen, I guess, the problem with Immutable's games, which I think, as I say, generally are pretty high quality games, is they've just not sustained, they've not had a good enough retention, and they've not been able to build a big enough sort of community to keep themselves going. So over time we expect this to probably, you can see, we get the spike up and it sort of looks like it's sort of dropping back down again already. So a warning sign there. Okay, thanks for watching. Come back next month, see what's happening then. Bye.